Hello and welcome to Prospects to Pros. My name is Nate Tice. I am your host today. Today, we're going to be talking about first-year players, second-year players, various categories in the NFC. We'll be going division by division. Last week, we did the AFC. So if you want to check that one out, it's still on the feed, still pretty fresh. Even with cuts, we have not said anything too stupid with cuts day, and none of the guys that we touted got cut or anything like that. So make sure to check that one out. But today, doing the NFC, and to help me do that, as always, the master, the expert, the beast himself, Dane Brugler. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I think I did mention Cade York. He did get cut by the Browns, so we did have one. But I think that was it. We're taping this afternoon on Tuesday, so right in the middle of when all these cuts are happening. So you never know. But I think we'll be in good shape. But any big takeaways from week 0 college football? I mean, it was just I was watching tape this morning, and it's UTEP, but it's just feels so good to have new tape. It's like the new season. We didn't have a lot of big games week 0, but Gavin Hardison, quarterback for UTEP. Yeah, he was my 13th senior quarterback in my ranking, something like that. He's got something to him. He's got an arm, so he'll have a chance. But not a lot of big games. Notre Dame, USC played, Sam Hartman, Caleb Williams. So something to take away from week 0, but weren't any big storylines happening.
Right. It was, USC defense looks the same. Caleb Williams looks the same. Compliment. One is derogatory and one is complimentary when I say the same there. But the UTEP quarterback, I've been meaning to ask you about him because I went back and watched his game against Oklahoma last year. I was just, that's what's nice with week 0, no NFL on. It's like, okay, I can take an hour here. He's got a real arm. Like, he's got a live arm, and he could throw off platform. The joke I made, I shouldn't have made this joke because he's an okay athlete. But I said he throws like Jeff George, but he runs like Jeff George today. And that's kind of how it is. But I mean, he's got some real juice now. Someone to keep an eye on. So I think that's a lot of fun. I wasn't really expecting to focus on the UTEP Miners this entire season, but I will be making sure to keep an eye on that guy.
Well, it's such a loaded senior class of quarterbacks, all these guys. He's a guy that could get lost in the mix, but he's a guy that scouts are watching closely because he does have an NFL arm. Average size, 6'1.5".
Yep.
Probably around 215 pounds. Like you said, he's an average athlete at best. Like, I think he'll run under a 5-second 40. That's probably the nicest thing I could say about his athleticism. But he's got an NFL arm. That touchdown that they called back, or he dropped it. The receiver dropped it in the end zone. That's an NFL throw. So Gavin Hardison, a name, underrated name to know that we'll be talking about throughout the draft process.
And like you said, an interesting QB class, another interesting name to keep an eye on. And really, the Oklahoma tape was pretty cool because it wasn't just the bombs, that's which was outstanding too. He puts them on the money, which is consistently, but he had a couple RPO kind of trick shots, like flat-footed and stuff. And so it was, okay, all right, that's good. Okay, you're not a great athlete, but at least you're not, falling down and trying to chew bubblegum and walk at the same time. Right. So that's good. All right, so let's jump into the guys that are actually already in the NFL or about to start their first NFL season. Again, we're going through the NFC. We'll have various categories. Those categories are going to be second-year players first and then rookies. We're just going to go division by division, loading up on, but we'll hit on probably every team with some guy in some way, shape, or form. So didn't want to load too many names in here, although we'll probably have about 40 honorable mentions for everybody because Dane and I cannot help ourselves. But starting with the NFC East, second-year players with most to prove for you, Dane. Let's get this thing going.
All right, so I have co-winners here. The two names that immediately came to mind, first, Evan Neal, Giants right tackle. He's banged up last year, and I know that affected how he played, especially over those final 2 months. But, man, he really struggled for stretches. That wild card playoff game, it was ugly. But I will say, if there's any team that understands some of the learning curves at tackle for young players, it's the Giants. Andrew Thomas, he was not good as a rookie. And then he made a big jump in year 2. And then, last year he was near elite. So obviously the Giants they're hoping Neal follows a similar path, a lot to prove this year. And then the other player wanted to mention Eagles nose tackle Jordan Davis. I wasn't
two names I had.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. I wasn't super high on him coming out. I thought there were more concerns with him as a prospect than most believed, and
Mm-hmm.
it's something we talked about a lot leading up
Yes.
until draft day, right? And my main concern was how often can he stay on the field and still play at a high level? He was good as a senior at Georgia. It's not like I'm saying he's a bad player. He was good his final year at Georgia, but he averaged 25 snaps a game. And
Yep.
so if you ask him to play 30 plus, 40 plus snaps in the NFL and that's what you're going to ask him to do. If you're
Yeah.
to justify
It's a first round
drafting him in
pick.
the top 15, right?
Yeah.
It was 13th overall. So it was a high first round pick. Can he live up to that? Last year for the Eagles as a rookie, he played in 16 games as a rookie. He logged more than 25 snaps in a game just once. So, like I said, don't get me wrong. I like Davis. I think he can grow into a dominant run defender, but he has to show that he can stay on the field and sustain that high level of play instead of just being a flash player and someone that's going to be a part timer as opposed to someone giving you 40 snaps a game on defense.
Right. He's kind of looked like a I don't want to say the term. I'm not going to say the term. I was going to say a sideshow attraction, but an anomaly. Like he's just like such an outlier size wise, and it's so
Right.
interesting. But it's not Ted Washington right now. It's
Mhm.
not those types of guys that he's actually affecting the game. And I remember the pre-draft process, and you were kind of like, okay, guys, yeah, he's interesting, and he's obviously gigantic, but you still have to like do something. And yes,
Yeah.
I know nose tackles aren't going to load the stats up because of just what they're asked to do and fill blocks and everything. But he still has to, when he gets those one-on-ones, push the guard back, push the center back. Like undersized guys were handily handling him. Like it wasn't just like anything where he's actually affecting the game, creating pressure. I could
Yeah.
barely remember any pressures that he created off the top of my head when I watched, several games of that Eagles defense because they had such a good defense. But yeah, I agree with that Jordan Davis one where it's like he has to start doing something. And watching this preseason, it's kind of more of the same, which is a little concerning. And they need
Mhm.
him. They moved on from Javon Hargrave. Like they're invested in these guys with him and another guy I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute. But they
Yep.
invested in these guys on the interior. You got to do something, and you can't just be a plugging nose, but you got to be a plugging nose that actually affects the game. And then same with Evan Neal. Didn't he also like get contacts or get LASIK or something like that? Evan Neal, like,
Yeah.
very recently.
Whatever helps. That's
Whatever
great.
helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a guy that I was high on. I ended up having him as my
Mhm.
tackle 3. I really like Cross. I'm sure we'll talk about him and
Mhm.
Aquanu. I really came around on Aquanu. But I just thought Neal too. I thought he would also hit the ground running. I thought he'd be a very kind of safe-ish kind of prospect because of what he was asked to do in college and his frame and everything. But like you, I'm not out on it. Like you just mentioned, Andrew Thomas was an all-pro level player last year. Neal's with their offensive line coach, Bobby Johnson, I think is one of the better ones in the league. So I'm with you that I'm not out on both of these players, but they might have to start being more consistent to justify their high picks.
Yeah.
All right. So now second year players ready to take a big step. Who do you have here on the NFC East?
I think a couple Cowboys came to mind among these second-year players. Jake Ferguson. He's going to be the starter at tight end with Dalton Schultz in Houston, so he'll see plenty of targets, plenty of opportunity. Jalen Tolbert, the receiver. He's behind CD and Brandon Cooks and Gallup, but he's had a great training camp, and at the very least, you hope he can fill the shoes of Noah Brown and be a guy that can give you some snaps off the bench. But I'm going to go with Jahan Dotson, the Commanders receiver. Second year, to me, going into a second year, he is ready to break out. He missed almost half of last season with that hamstring injury. He ranked 10th among rookies in targets, but he was tied for first in touchdown catches with 7. So obviously, the wild card in all this, when you talk about the Commanders in that offense, Sam Howell at quarterback, what will that look like? But Dotson, Terry McLaurin, it's such a dynamic 1-2 punch that, I can't help but be optimistic about it. And Dotson, going back to my scouting report coming out of Penn State, one of probably the biggest catch radius I've ever scouted for a player under 5'11". You rarely see him drop the ball. His routes are crisp. He's a 4.3 athlete.
Yep.
He's going to produce this year. So I'm very excited to see what he looks like, and we'll see if he's ready to break out.
Dotson was one of mine as well. I think we both loved him going into the draft
Yeah.
process last year, just for all the things you said. He just screamed high end number 2. And it's like he's already looking the part. I mean, yeah, the preseason looks great. And when he played last year when the ball actually got to him, he actually was looking the part as well. I'm glad you brought up the red zone stat as well, because that is where that catch radius really comes into play. Yeah. It's just, and also the game that always stands out to me is the Michigan State snow game, I think it was, that they had. And everybody else is slipping and everything, and he's snatching throws away from him on the move. The ball is not going anywhere near him. He's still grabbing that ball. Big fan of him. So that's a great call. I'm going to go with another kind of one of my guys from last draft, and really had a nice rookie season, even was more positive right away than I thought. And that's Tyler Smith, the offensive guard / offensive tackle for the Cowboys. I'm going to be playing left guard for them with another T.Y. Smith, right next to him at left tackle. Who knows if he stays healthy, but I thought Tyler was way more of a real NFL player way earlier than I ever thought he would be. His thing with, you could see the athleticism and everything coming out of college, but it was just always, he had all those holds. And I know that was a concern with a lot of people, but usually when holding is a concern, it's when guys are like, they're not athletic enough to keep their feet, and so they have to grab. His was because his hands were just terrible. They were so outside, and he was yanking guys. And so he had just learned subtleties. And even last preseason, he was showing it. During the regular season, he held his own at left tackle. Guard could be a really good spot for him. I think he's going to take another big step. One of my bold takes on our I think it was top 10 offenses pod. We were talking about the Cowboys, but I had Tyler Smith. I think he's going to make the Pro Bowl this year. I'm very high on him, and I think he's going to just take another step forward. Good player already.
Yeah, no, I mean, and you're exactly right. He was a raw player coming out of Tulsa. There's no way around that. And so you think, all right, he's got the play strength. You really like the movement skills. You like the physical traits that he offers, but the gap of technical development, mental development. You mentioned the penalties. He led all rookies in penalties. He had like 15 penalties or something like that. But it's just, you were worried about how long was he going to bridge that gap and be a functional NFL player? Because that's all the Cowboys really needed from him last year. Yeah, he exceeded expectations. Yeah. So, I think that I thought it would take a more patient coaching staff and that's something that worried me, where the Cowboys, they drafted him high in the first round, and and the Cowboys are obviously a win now team. I was worried about, just them being a little impatient with him, but to all the credit, give Tyler Smith all the credit, the way he worked, the way he developed in short order. That's a good one, because the Cowboys have to feel pretty optimistic about the player they got when I don't know. I mean, he was option, B, C, D. Like, he wasn't. I don't think they went into the draft thinking that's going to be our guy, but that's how the draft fell, and I think they're certainly happy with it now.
I'm sure they are. It's kind of like the Micah Parsons draft, where they were trying to take a corner. 100%. They just fell enough.
They wanted Patrick Surtain. They wanted J.C. Horn, and they ended up
getting.
Weren't
wrong about, but it's just but let's fall into a generational pass rusher.
Even a guy like Zion Johnson, we talked about him last. The Cowboys would have loved to have Zion Johnson, but he got snatched up at the top 20. He doesn't fall to them, and here they are with Tyler Smith, and I don't think they regret that the way things played out at all.
Unbelievable. It's a real good player. Like just everything you said. It's just that I thought it would take him a year, and it's the fact he was already doing it in month one was really interesting. So sticking with the second year players, who is one or a couple that had a better first year or a better rookie season than most people realize?
Well, sticking with the Cowboys, they've got one of the they've got one of the best pass rushing duos with Micah Parsons and Marcus Lawrence, but Sam Williams had a really nice first year as a sub-package pass rusher. He had the second highest pass rush rate among rookies, and it's funny with the Cowboys, they've never been shy with that second round pick to be a little risky, put it that way.
The Randy Gregory pick. That's
Randy Gregory, Jalen Smith coming off that injury, Randy Gregory and his issues. Kelvin Joseph was a second rounder, and I haven't been keeping track if he's a cut or not, but he's on the bubble of making that Cowboys roster. Sam Williams, this was a Dan Quinn pick. He with Williams, he had some troubling character concerns out of Ole Miss. It's something that has followed him to the NFL. He had a reckless driving charge last year, and then this summer he was arrested for possession and some type of illegal weapons charge. So
speeding, yeah.
There's still a lot we got to figure out with Williams, right? But all I know is he can really affect the quarterback with that upfield acceleration, that attacking rush style. So, what he put together, I think he had a better rookie season than I think most people realize. And then cornerback Deron Bland. Yep. Was that your guy? That you're going to say?
That was number one, and I still have another Cowboy to talk about.
I love it. Well, Bland. He worked primarily out of the slot, and I mean, easily outplayed where they took him in the 5th round. So I think that maybe it was the Colts game, that midseason game. That's where I was really like, okay, this is not a flash in the pan. This guy's pretty good. He had a pair of picks in that game. He locked it down. So there were. Watching his Fresno State tape, there were concerns about just his ability to read routes and stay connected, but he had some of the key traits that you want at corner. And this is what the Cowboys scouts focused on. He had speed, he had length, and he had toughness. And that's a great foundation for a corner. That's what the Cowboys were betting on. And so far, so good, because he played pretty well as a rookie.
Yeah, and the toughness speaks. That's you have to be to play the nickel. You have to be in that run fit. And I mean, he was one when he was playing, and I think that's where I was still high on the Cowboys defense going into last season or even early on. And it was just like, well, you got a 5th round rookie starting for him. That's always kind of like I don't know if that's something to bet on, but he never missed a beat. Yeah, good player. That was one of mine as well. I had Jake Ferguson as well, who you already mentioned. Tight end for Cowboys, also Wisconsin Badger. But I wasn't like high on him coming out. Like I never really touted him. He went exactly where I thought he should have gone. I had about a 4th round grade on him.
Early day 3, right?
Yeah. And he looks good. He looks just like another 3-down tight end for the Cowboys that just like can do everything well. Maybe not an exceptional athlete, not an exceptional blocker, but he's actually solid in the area, can block in line. He can move a little bit. He can catch some balls. He's like kind of a nice underneath option, actually pretty good intermediate. Yeah, he's been way better.
A lot of Dalton Schultz there, right? I mean,
exactly. I mean, all their guys look exactly alike.
Right.
It's all the Big Ten guys.
They have a type. They do.
They do. I know, and they all look good. I mean, Hendershot looked good. I mean, they have a thing for these tight ends. And then I actually had
Maker. They drafted in the 2nd round this year.
Another Michigan guy. The guy I actually wanted to ask you about is another tight end, but it is for the Giants, and that's Daniel. Is it Bellinger or Bellinger?
Bellinger.
It is Bellinger, right? He's from Vegas, actually. I know that.
Yep. San Diego State.
Way more of a dynamic receiver than I think I even gave him credit for coming out. And they used him really well. They've done a great job there in New York with how they scheme stuff up on their offense, especially. But just been a lot better athlete, better receiver, just a better everything than I gave him credit for. But he's really just looked the part as a very functional, very useful tight end. Now they got Darren Waller. I think those two kind of pair very well together. So that I just want to give him a shout out because he was even rewatching the Giants. He's like, he stands out more than I expected.
That's a great call. I think if not for his injury that he had last year, more people would know who Bellinger is. I mean, I think he's an above average athlete for his size. You see the body control, and you see it as both a blocker and receiver.
Yes.
He didn't have a ton of production in college, and so I think that people didn't really know about him or recognize him as a prospect, right? But you see ball skills, as toughness, versatility is there. As a blocker, he's very detail oriented. He's a guy that is going to execute his assignments, and so. Again, did not have the production in college, but once he got part of, I gave him a 4th round grade, and I thought he would come in, be solid, and that's so far so good. That's exactly what he's been. One other guy I want to mention too, Eagles safety Reed Blankenship, who as a rookie, he had more defensive snaps for the Eagles last year than Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean combined. So I mean, coming into camp this year. They've got a lot of safeties in Philly. He was fighting for a starting job, and it looks like he secured one. So not bad for an undrafted rookie who played pretty well last year. Someone that the Eagles really relied on.
Yeah, and he was a guy when he was playing. Like people were kind of like making fun of him, like kind of going like, "Hey, this guy's on the field, we're screwed and everything." And I kind of haven't given this. I'm glad we get to talk about him. I thought he played okay, and I thought he played well. And it was mostly I want to say they played the Cowboys at Dallas. That was the game that I'm thinking of. but it was late in the season. I think it was when Minshew was starting and everything, but he was playing in safety, and I actually thought he looked fine. Like, and I might be crossing my wires here, but glad he gave him a shout out because I think he got dogged for reasons I couldn't explain because it did not reflect what his on-field ability was. All right, now let's go to the rookies. Who's the first round rookie that you're most excited to watch? I think there's actually a couple good ones here. I didn't narrow down mine at all, so I'm curious what you who's your 1A, because I got a 1A, B, and C.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've got to go with the Eagles first rounders, both of them. Jalen Carter, arguably the best player in the entire draft class, and you're reuniting him with Jordan Davis on that defensive line. What does that look like? And then Nolan Smith, how does he fit into the pass rush rotation? Will he be primarily an upfield player like Hassan Reddick has been for the Eagles? Are they going to ask him to drop as more of a linebacker? So with Nolan Smith, my 11th overall player, I believe. He fell to 30th. So, and the main concern there was usage. And so I'm eager to see how Sean Desai, who first season as Eagles defensive coordinator, and he's a coach known for being a little outside the box with how he operates the front seven, who he's bringing, what he's asking these guys to do. So I'm very interested to see how he uses a toy like Nolan Smith.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. And I think the scheme fit I'm trying to figure out for him as well, because they used him as a straight edge pass rusher, get up the field type in preseason. And what I think we both liked with Smith was I think he has some do it allness, you said, with dropping and everything. So I think I'm curious, especially their blitzing. It looks like a little bit more. So seeing him as a dropper, and obviously there's some translation from what he did in college. So obviously a guy. I had Jalen Carter as well. I can't wait to watch him. I just want to watch him in the NFL, real reps, real, amount of reps, and also just what he's asked to do. Yeah, very excited. I think especially in that type of defense, that just go ahead and go. Also, Emmanuel Forbes, the corner from Washington, their first round.
All 170 pounds of them.
All 170 pounds of them. I like them all. That's exactly it. I'm excited to watch. I'm scared to watch. But a guy that I thought going into watching him originally, I thought I'd be low on because what you said, he's skinny. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And a ball hawk, obviously with the pick sixes and everything, but just a nice football player. Like he's willing to tackle, even if kind of falls off guys, especially in the preseason a couple times. But I kind of liked some of the traits, and I just think he has some dynamic abilities. And Deontay Banks has actually looked pretty good in preseason as well, the corner for the Giants. So have to give him.
As I say, it's interesting because with Forbes, when I started really, like doing like top 50s and things like that, I had him and Keely Ringo, the Georgia corner, pretty close. And then like the more I study the tape and get into it, the more Forbes and Ringo went the opposite ways, because Forbes is just a tough football player, even though he has 170 pounds, even though, he doesn't have or he falls outside some of the boxes that you want. And he also had 16 total interceptions. A lot of those you return back for touchdowns. I mean, those ball skills, it's just not by accident. And so where Ringo couldn't find the ball, if you just threw it right at him. So that is a big reason why they separated themselves. One went 16 overall, 17 overall. The other went in the fourth round. So, and then I'm glad you mentioned Deontay Banks. I mean, both these rookie corners, they're going to a division with C.D. Lamb, with Brandon Cooks, with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. I mean, there's some real talent. We talked about Jahan Dotson. So
Scary Terry.
McLaurin, right. There's a lot of receiver talent. So a lot of opportunities for these corners to sink or swim early.
No, absolutely. And and Forbes and Banks have looked okay in preseason where it's like, okay, all right, cool. That's good to see. No, that's it with Forbes, is that ball hawkness it's very real. He's a very aware football player. I love watching him in zone and just kind of baiting. He understands high lows, which is really cool to see a young corner be able to do that. So getting out of the first round, any non-first, any, of course you're going to have a couple, but non-first round rookies that can make the biggest impact in your mind, Dane.
Well, I'm eager to see Deuce Vaughn and how that works in Dallas.
They just cut Malik Davis, so it's
right. And obviously Pollard's the guy, but Deuce Vaughn, they're going to use him in some capacity. And so what does that look like? That's going to be really interesting. Sidney Brown with the Eagles, third round safety, who he will start games for them this year. I feel confident saying that. And so just how does that all work out? But my answer, I'm going to go with Giants receiver Jalin Hyatt because of that vertical speed, the ability to win deep. I mean, even if he's the fourth, fifth receiver to start, which probably will be, even if he's only seeing a few targets per game, just a threat of that speed. It changes the way defenses will react. And you can bet Brian Dable, Mike Kafka, I mean, they're going to look to expose that advantage, with that vertical element that Hyatt brings to the offense. So the impact that Hyatt can offer, I'm just interested to see how that works out.
Yeah, and it looks like this is what I kind of alluded to earlier is with Kafka is he's just very, very good at adapting, which I've already seen. It's only been 1 year as a true play caller, but it's really cool how what he did with Daniel Jones and Saquon and their Island of Misfit Toys pass catchers that they had last year. But like with Hyatt already, and there's already the clip going around, you can see where he's going vertical against Sauce Gardner.
Right?
They understand what he's good and bad at. Okay, yeah, he might not be press, he might be better from the slot, but let's get him on the move. Let's keep him off the ball. Let's get him on the move. Let him use
the corner's going to give him space. Let him take advantage of that. Let him expose it.
Yeah. They got so many guys that can win underneath that even if he doesn't.
You don't say.
Yeah, right. They got 20 of them. Right. But it's that this is a guy that can kind of be a booster effect for them, and even if he doesn't get all the targets. So that's a great shout out. And Deuce Vaughn is what was your final grade on Deuce Vaughn? I loved him but I just had to be realistic. So I had like a 6th, 7th round on him. But it was I like as an actual football player with vision and actual running back ability, he would have been like a day 2 pick if he was normal sized. I gave him like that, but
I gave him a late 4th, early 5th. I mean, I was not super high on him. He's not going to be a consistent between the tackles runner in the NFL. It's not going to happen. But if you give him any type of space, man, he is so much fun. And that size, again, this isn't like a running back who has been 5'11" his whole life, and then he woke up one day and he's 5'5", and he's like, oh no, like I don't know. He's always been short. He knows how to use that to his advantage. Running close to the ground, hiding behind the big blockers, and then just picking his way through, seeing the opportunity, and boom, he's hitting the crease. So, I think that size, even though it's not ideal and it will limit him, it's something that it's also going to lead to some big plays, and so that's why I'm so interested to see how the Cowboys use him. Is it going to be? Because he will be limited in some third down, as a blocker, but he can catch a ball. Pollard. He's never been the guy in Dallas in terms of workload. So how do they balance that? And so the Cowboys are a team that are expected to be in the playoffs, expected to push for wins in the playoff. How they operate this run game and use a talent like Deuce Vaughn who's so unique is definitely one of the main storylines for this team.
Yeah, no, it's they obviously like him, so that's again, I want to see how they use him. My one I just want to throw on here is another Giants player is center John Michael Schmitz, their 2nd round pick. Seems like he's already starting for them. Obviously, they like him. Shout out to Bobby Johnson again. Heard an interview with him where he's talking about him how easily he adapted to the NFL game. So that's really cool. Has some maturity stuff. So center for the Giants, hopefully can be a long-term starter for them. Always love to see young centers develop. So John Michael Schmitz could see some impact for Big Blue this year. All right, moving on over to the Central Time Zone, NFC North. Second-year players with most to prove. Who do you got for us, Dane?
The Bears had 3 picks on day 2 last year. Jaquan Brisker looks like a solid starting safety, but it's the other 2 picks who were pretty disappointing in year 1. Offense has had really no trouble picking on Kyler Gordon last year. He was targeted last season among rookies. He was near the top. When he was targeted, receivers had it's like an 81.9, something like that, reception rate, which was by far the most among all rookies. No other rookie had above 75%. So when they threw in his direction, good things happened for the offense. He also had like 7 penalties. He was inconsistent versus the run. So, all right, now that's the bad news. The good news, you talk to anybody who has watched Bears practices this summer, they'll tell you Gordon's been the star of the camp. So that's obviously encouraging, but we have to see it on the field during games for it to really matter. And so Kyler Gordon, really eager to see what he looks like this year for the Bears. He was their first pick last year. It was like 39th overall. So we're talking about a top 40 pick. You have to hit on those guys. The other day 2 pick, who talk about the most to prove, Velus Jones, who was a really surprising pick when it happened, and it has not aged well so far. He had only 7 catches on 12 targets as a rookie. Yes, an older prospect, and even as a return man, because that was a major part of why the Bears drafted him in the 3rd round. He was expected to make a big impact in that way. He was solid as a kick returner. He averaged over 27 yards per kick return, but they couldn't trust him as a punt returner, and so that's off the board. I thought, just getting feedback from scouts throughout the process, most saw him as a 5th round or later type of prospect. And in year 1, that's how he played. So a lot to prove from Jones here going into year 2.
No, it surprised us. I remember Robert looking at us in the draft show, and we both just were like, like, where to start? Like,
I got nothing. I got nothing.
I know. I'm sorry. Sorry, Robert. Yeah, we like the other guys. No, but no, Gordon's even in preseason games, he's looked better. I think is at the very minimum. And I liked him coming out. So it's a tough position, especially going into a slot like that. It's a lot to go through, a lot to sort through at the NFL level. I'm going to go with Devontae Wyatt, defensive tackle for the Packers, their 1st round pick last year. Just because I know the Packers are slow with rookies. They let these guys take their time. You have to earn your spot on the start with the starters. Got to see it this year. They need him. Not saying anything negative. We just haven't seen much of him. So I really want to see him this year. And I think reports have been positive. And another guy I really like coming out. I think he's dynamic, especially just as a disruptor. And it's a guy they really need to step up. The other team, I just said team, not even just player. I just said the Vikings' first 3 picks last year. Lewis Steen, Andrew Booth, and Ed Ingram. All 3 of them need something out of you guys. So I know they've battled injuries and everything, but even when they've been, Ed Ingram, when he's been starting, has been just barely playable.
Wasn't good.
Booth, Booth has been, that's been his kind of his MOs with injuries. And then Steen's kind of just been up and down with both things. So got to see things with all 3 of them. So I think all 3 have something to prove, especially with that regime right now. All right.
No, those are good. The only other name I would mention too would be Quay Walker, the Packers' other 1st round pick, who just a dreadful run defender in year 1. I mean, he looked good in coverage because he's that big, long athlete. But his run fits were inconsistent. He did not play smart football, and that really peaked. It was against the Lions when he pushed the trainer and got ejected. Like, it was just like you can't play stupid in the NFL. No. It doesn't matter how athletic you are. You can get by at in the SEC doing that kind of stuff, but you're going to get exposed quickly if you don't play smart, disciplined football in the NFL against pros. So a lot from Quay Walker that we still need to see.
Yeah, it's a good reminder. Some of these very athletic toolsy linebackers and stuff is they get away with it so much at college where they can have that half-second delay and then they go, oh, I'll just run the guy down anyways. I'm good. So no, that's a great call. Yeah, I think we just nailed like 9 of the top 10 picks in this division. Way to go, Lions. Way to avoid this. Way to avoid this a little bit. But sticking with second-year players, maybe something a little more positive. Second-year players ready to take a big step this year.
Well, speaking of the Lions, 1st round pick, suspension or not, Jameson Williams. He's an easy breakout candidate, right? I mean, because he missed almost all of last year as he's recovering from that ACL injury that he suffered at Alabama. It was in the playoff game against Georgia, the championship game. He had only 1 catch last year on 8 targets, so not great, but that 1 catch, he made it count. There's a 41-yard touchdown. He just ran past everyone to the end zone. So, I mean, it's fun. And I'm glad we had a chance to talk about this as we're over a year removed. But you go back to that 2022 wide receiver class, it was so tough to stack those guys because they were all so talented, but in different ways. They just offered something a little different, right? And we talked about this how many times leading up to the draft that year with Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, Drake London, Chris Olave, you throw Jahan Dotson and Trey Burks in there. I mean, it was really more of a stylistic preference than anything. For me, like Garrett Wilson, I love the skill set. He was my easy wide receiver 1 by the time it was all said and done. But then I really struggled with wide receiver 2 because I loved London. I loved Olave. I loved Jameson Williams. And I ended up going with Jameson Williams as my wide receiver too, because the speed was just so special. And not just the speed, but the way he used it within his route construction.
Speed.
Yeah, the ball instincts were there. So, I should mention suspended 6 games, the first 6 games this year for the gambling, violating the gambling policy in the NFL. But once he gets back on the field, man, he could be such a weapon. And I can't wait to see it. He's an easy breakout candidate.
Yeah, and the thing with too, what you loved about him was he wasn't like a great blocker or anything, but he was willing, and he was a great special teamer. There's clips, we've seen it like as the gunner, and he used him like that last year. The Lions were easing him back, getting him used to kind of running again. So I know I just want to see him, like, because I think people that aren't focused on kind of the draft and young players and everything like that, or watch college ball, they just focus on the NFL. It's like, wait till you see this speed. Wait till you see this. It's different. It really is. I mean, it was so hard to come up with a comparison with them. And I love what you're talking about the receiver class last year, because there will be a guy I talk about later, but it was just all about flavors. And it wasn't a shocker who ended up being my number one guy with Drake London as a sucker for size that I like. And then I went London, I think Olave 2, and then I went Wilson 3, Jameson Williams 4. I think that's how I ended up. But then even Garrett Wilson, we'll talk about all these guys. They're great players, all the guys to keep an eye on. But I actually went with Zach Tom, the 4th rounder for the Packers, who played all over last year. They have him as a starting right tackle, but they're kind of using him in at center as well. I'd be lying if I said I watched a lot of day 3 offensive linemen last year. I do skill positions and I just catch up for all the top 100 guys. But a guy like Zach Tom, like, what was kind of his MO maybe coming out of college that you remember, Dane? And did you expect maybe this kind of consistent good play right away from a 4th round rookie like this? Any insight on Tom?
No, I mean, I didn't expect this, but the Packers have a knack for finding these guys, right? I think with Tom, I think the thing that stood out the most was the versatility. I mean, he is a guy that when he's at Wake Forest, he started as a center, then he moved to left tackle. He goes to the Packers, and he played everywhere except for center. They played on both guard spots, they played on both tackle spots. But he also has that experience at center if eventually that's what they want him to do. So he's a guy that really trusts his technique. He trusts his skill. Like, he understands what he's good at and what maybe he's not good at. His tape, strong, independent hands. Not a mauler, not a guy that's just going to latch and control you. He doesn't have that core strength. Not a guy with that like the mass on his body, the length that gets you really excited. But body control, understanding of angles, really smart. I graded him as a 4th rounder, a guy that could be a backup, maybe become a starter. I think he's already exceeded those expectations.
Yeah, and it looks even like better. It shocked me because I hear it and it's like, fans are hyping up their guy, their day 3 guy, their steal, their gem. And you're like, okay, yeah, whatever, I'll watch him. And I was like, oh shoot, he looks like a vet. And everything you're saying, understanding, and that's kind of what he looks like. He the hand technique, he's very good at the whole replacement hands, hand replacement. Yes. A guy gets knocked off and he just keeps it on. But no, Tom is already, I think, a good player. And I think just someone that can just keep getting better as they find the kind of real landing spot for him. But glad you bring it up as versatility as well. The last one for the 2nd-year players in the NFC North, 2nd-year player who had a better first year than most people realized.
Well, just to follow along with what you were saying, with tackles, I going back and watching the offensive tackles from that 2022 class and seeing how they performed as rookies, I was far more impressed with Braxton Jones than I thought I'd be. He started all 17 games at left tackle for the Bears as a 5th round pick, which that alone, just being out there and starting games as a 5th round pick at left tackle, that's a win if you're Chicago. But I can't believe I'm saying this. I thought he was the best rookie offensive tackle last year. And that is saying something, considering
it's not crazy though.
It was a really, it was a really tackle rich. And I'm not saying if we had to redraft, he would be the first tackle drafted. I'm not saying that. I'm saying just as rookies from week to week, I thought he was the most consistent. And they were 3 tackles drafted top 10 that year with Icky and Evan Neal and Charles Cross. And I mean, Charles Cross certainly has a case to be made as well, but I was really going back and watching those
You're
Bears
talking
games.
about him in that same tier as those guys is crazy.
Right.
And it's not a second rounder; it's a fifth rounder.
Fifth rounder out of Southern
It's
Utah, a
crazy.
guy that hadn't faced top competition week in, week out. And I mean, I throw on the matchup against the Bills. I mean, maybe he gave up one pressure, maybe. Also really good in the run game. So the one thing that really stood out were some of the penalties. Those were an issue. But he's a young player. You expect, especially in the fifth round, you expect that. He was a lot better than I thought he was. And I think better than most people realize.
He's the guy just talking about like Tom and where people are like, oh, it's our day 3 rookie that we all love. And it's like, okay, yeah, sure. He's probably just fine. And again, like you're saying, he was a plus player.
He was.
And then the zone stuff he's really good at. You mentioned the run game. He was one of the guys I mentioned too. I had Jaquan Brisker as well, but that's kind of like, I can't talk about Jaquan Brisker anymore. Anyone who listens to any of these shows, I think I've talked about 40 times in the last year. So, but Jaquan Brisker, keep an eye on him. But then the last guy, the other guy I'm going to throw in here is James Houston, the edge for the Lions,
That's
6th rounder.
Yeah.
I mean, if you told me this guy would come in the last month and a half of the season and like do what he did, like that's not one of the bets I would have made on the 2022 season. I looked up his stats on True Media and lowered the threshold. This is how little or how few snaps James Houston played. 88 pass rush snaps. Usually the threshold I use is 200 when I look at stats to get qualifiers. So 88 pass rush snaps. So I lowered the threshold all the way down to 88 just to see where he ranked. First in QB hits per pass rush snap. First in the entire NFL, 13.6%. To put that in perspective, Nick Bosa led the NFL last year with a historical number, like an all-time number at 10.1%. So better than like JJ Watt's best seasons. I know it's 88 snaps. Most of these guys have 500 of these. So that's why you don't want to disco stew this all the way to the top and, extrapolate all of it. But he was also first in splash plays per snap, which is, sacks and TFLs and PBUs and run stops and all those types of things. But James Houston, anyone paying attention to the lines, you could just see him affecting the game. He had a great battle with Ike Ekwonu from the Panthers that really made me actually this preseason and last season during the season. But during the regular season,
more than a few times. Yeah,
he got him. It was like he was winning more than losing, and it was a good battle for those two young guys. But really fun kind of DPR designated pass rusher type that I mean, 6th rounder emerged out of nowhere. What was kind of insight maybe why he lasted to the 6th rounder, what he was? Because it wasn't like he was an overwhelming profile as a prospect.
Well, and people, I don't think they know, like he started at Florida. Like he was at Florida for a while as an SEC guy, transfers to Jackson State and really productive. He had like 25 tackles for losses last year, 16 sacks, a ridiculous forced fumbles numbers, like 6 or 7, something crazy. But it's just the profile, like the size, he was like 6 foot even, really short, but he was disproportionately long, like 34.5-inch arms. And you see that. You see the heavy hands.
Like Uche's like that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's super explosive. And so you use that short stature. If you can bend a little bit, you've got that explosion, and you use that short stature to your advantage to dip underneath, to use leverage. And that's exactly what he does. But he'll go at you too. He'll use those heavy hands. He'll use that length that he has. So that some of that natural twitch, it really it shows on tape. He's a guy that got in trouble at Florida. I think just some of the discipline stuff that factors into this too. But like you said, as a DPR, a guy that can come in and give you quality pass rush snaps, you could do a lot worse than what Houston gave you or gave Detroit as a rookie last year.
It's like, even if that, obviously it's not going to maintain that rate and everything, like even if it just like halves, that's still such a useful player. And someone that you got in the 6th round, where some teams are, I mean, ask the Falcons, have been begging for any semblance of a pass rusher ever. And they find this guy in the 6th round. So yeah, just an interesting player, unique player, and productive. And eye test has been matching it. It's not, I don't think anything fluky. He's straight up beating his guy. And I think that's really cool.
I wrote down 3 pass rushers from the North here. Houston was one of them. And then 2 other words I'll just mention. Kingsley Enagbare from the Packers. He was like the final pick of the 5th round. Yeah. He had the same pass rush win rate last year as Joe Tryon, as Jadeveon Clowney. Like he's not a speed guy, which is why he fell on draft weekend, but power in his hands. He can forklift blockers from his path.
Yes, that's what he did
he's
this
relentless.
preseason.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So he was a nice find for the Packers in round 5, and then Dominique Robinson for the Bears.
Yeah.
Fun stories: a wide receiver, former quarterback, then wide receiver, then turned pass rusher at Miami of Ohio. Bears draft him. He's the opposite. He's more of that speed guy. Offenses, they know they can run at him, and that really limits his ceiling. But he's got the juice where he can get pressure on those obvious passing downs, like a James Houston.
Nice. I know. Yeah, some fun ones. I'm glad he gave the other ones a shout out too, because it's fun when it's not just the elite pedigree guys that, especially at a position like this. I mean, we're talking about even left tackle. We're talking about Braxton Jones, and we're talking about James Houston. These guys are like real good players as day 3 rookies at positions that teams throw so many resources at. So we're going on to rookies here. Who's the first round rookie that you're most excited to watch this year?
Yeah, I wanted to say Darnell Wright. Speaking of tackles, what his impact can be at right tackle, and what that can do for the Bears offense as a whole. Obviously, the Bears are hoping Braxton Jones, Darnell Wright. You've got your bookend tackles for a long time. We'll see if that's how it works out. But I have to say Jahmyr Gibbs. That's who I'm most excited to see. Bijan Robinson, he got most of the pub when talking about running backs throughout the draft process, but the line I kept using with Gibbs was, you cannot list the top 25 prospects in last year's draft without including Gibbs. You just can't do it. He's so explosive as both a runner and receiver. Now it's 12 overall, a little higher than I thought he'd go.
Right.
Yeah, a little bit. But obviously the Lions have a plan for the usage and the impact, and I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, he's we just did our NFC North preview pod, and like they're relying a lot on him, which is good and bad. But it's like what he has juice, real juice. And obviously the pass catching stuff is what people are focusing on, but they need that in the run game, especially. And that was kind of our theme, our crux of our theme for talking about the Lions on offense was they need speed. And Jameson Williams is one, but until he comes back, they need it somewhere. And Gibbs is going to, I think, kind of bring that. For me, Darnell Wright was my first answer. And this is more of just me in a schematic nerd way. Jordan Addison, I'm also excited to watch just because I just want to see how the Vikings use him and what the Vikings offense looks like with this another talented player, and one that, especially after he tested and measured and everything, a lot of people cooled off on him. But I think me and you kind of were still fine with him. Like we were like, okay, no, because he's still a good player. Even watching Caleb Williams again, I just was like watching Addison. Like, man, he just has something to him as like a route runner and feel and hands. And yeah, even usually he's a way outlier of guys I usually like, but I just think he's a good football player.
There's some Calvin Ridley there. I mean, there's some of that to him, and where he went, if he ends up leading all rookies and targets, it wouldn't be surprising. I mean, you think about Justin Jefferson, all the attention he's going to demand. That obviously the Vikings are going to throw the ball quite a bit. Jordan Addison, he's going to be the number 2, number 3 in that offense, and so we'll be interested, like you said, to see how exactly they use him. A guy that 175 pounds, soaking wet, but he knows how to ball. So I think he's a guy that's going high, not high, but one of the first rookies drafted in fantasy football leagues for a reason.
Yeah. I hate sounding like this, but he plays bigger and plays faster on film. Like his testing neither matched what I expected. Like I knew he'd be lighter, but I didn't know he'd be that light. And I knew like he was an overwhelming athlete, but I didn't know he'd be like that. So, but I'm just very excited to watch the Vikings offense, more a curiosity and I think some optimism. So getting out of the first round, who's a non-first round rookie that can make the biggest impact at NFC North? I've got about 40 here.
I was gonna say, there's a lot of candidates, right? Brian Branch, one of the steals of the draft. Exactly. Yep. He's gonna be a dude in the secondary from day one. Can't wait to see that. Sam Laporta, sticking with the Lions. He's gonna see a ton of targets in the Lions offense. Exactly. All right, I'll let you talk about those two guys.
No, I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off. But it's just funny. Because I go by team, and I got the Lions. I was like, okay, well, we got to list both of those guys, and then I went to other teams. But yeah, great answers right there to start
Chicago. I mean, Tyreek Stevenson, the corner, a big, physical, athletic. He's had a nice camp. I think he's going to be an early factor for that defense. I'd really love to go with Tyler Scott for my answer, the speedy receiver for the Bears, one of my favorite guys in the draft.
Yeah.
But I have to go to Green Bay and what they did on day 2 of the draft. I think they hit the tight end lottery on day 2 with Tucker Kraft in the 3rd round, but more specifically, Luke Musgrave in round 2. I think he would have been the easy tight end 1 in most other drafts. He falls in the laps of Green Bay at pick 42. So, and I think ironically that was the pick they got from the Jets, I believe, in the Aaron Rodgers trade. But the athleticism, the speed that you see from Musgrave, I can't wait to see how they use him. The usage rate. He barely played last year because of his injury. This year, I think he's going to play a ton for the Packers. They're really expecting a lot out of him. I think he can do it. I think he's got the athleticism and to be able to step up and be that guy. Now, just needs to be a little more consistent finishing catches. Blocking. He is a good blocker. It's just NFL blocking is different, and it will take time for him to adjust to that. But as a pass catcher down the field, he is a guy that has absolutely a chance to blossom in this offense and be one of Jordan Love's top targets.
Yeah, I know in our tight end preview show, we talked about him, and I think my one-liner with him was just like he just moves different. Like that's all I couldn't like wrap my way like a good way, succinct way to really describe him. But other than that, and they obviously love him. Like it's hilarious. Like LaFleur won't shut up about him. He's like, oh, this rookie has to do this. Van Ness has to do this, and we'll see if we can play that guy. Luke Musgrave. Oh yeah, we got jet sweeps going to him. Oh yeah, we got him on third. We got him on the red zone. We got him on go balls. He just loves them, which is good. And he's playing every snap. He's on the field like every snap for them, which is good and bad. Good, it's a rookie tight end that you're relying on. So obviously, I'm glad you mentioned him. I thought you were going to mention Jayden Reed for the Packers as well.
Very well could have, because he's probably going to start, right? Inside, outside. I mean, he's a guy that with Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, those are guys that year 2 for both of them, and can. They're not proven, but I think both exceeded expectations in year 1. And so there's some expectations with them now, but how does Jayden Reed fit in that, with that trio of receivers right there? Jayden Reed, I don't think got the respect that he deserved throughout the process. He was the best receiver I saw at the Senior Bowl. He had an outstanding junior year, and then his senior year, the offense just fell apart without Kenneth Walker.
Terrible offense.
Yeah, it was tough to watch. But I mean, Jayden Reed was the same guy. He's got speed, outstanding ball skills. He'll take the ball and make catches over corners. He's a guy I'm excited to see as well. He's a good player.
Yeah, Jayden Reed he's the definition of a useful for me. Like it's just he's just a football player, and like you said, inside outside. Yeah, he just does a lot of things well. Checks a lot of boxes. I was so glad when we did the pre-show for the draft that you were high on him. I was like, okay, cool. I'm not going crazy because.
Oh, yeah.
It was a rough go with that offense. But yeah, Brian Branch was the first guy. He was my 1A because I think it'd be a breakout player. I try to avoid using rookies on our preview shows, but I had to with him because just awesome. Just a slot, useful blitzer, man coverage, zone, just kind of a very modern NFL defender that will play a lot of snaps and a lot of like tangible snaps that affect the game. And I just love his IQ. I compared him to Jimmy Ward coming out because Jimmy Ward moving to the slot last year, especially. That's kind of what my comparison came from. But I just think how they like to play the Lions do. They're going to be in a lot of man coverage. They're going to blitz a lot. I think that's where it's like, I like that with him. So another guy I'm really excited to watch him. Sam Laporta, of course, the tight end for the Lions. Roschon Johnson, want to throw him in here as well. They're already having him as a pass protecting back with the ones, I believe, with the Bears, which I think if anyone watched him, it's not surprising because he was such a smart and just well-rounded player. I think he's just, as the season goes along, he's going to eat more and more snaps. I really like Khalil Herbert, but I just think Johnson will just kind of get more and more of those real tangible dozen or so touches a game. And it'll just keep going. I also wanted to ask you about one other guy for the Vikings because is Ivan Pace, the undrafted free agent at linebacker. Like might be starting for them as an undrafted rookie linebacker. Right. Again, that's a good and bad thing. Maybe why did he drop, or maybe when undrafted in the first place? Do you have anything on that?
I gave him a 4th round grade, and like he just missed my top 100. He was right there. I was pretty surprised he went undrafted. I thought he would fall, but I didn't think he would go undrafted. I mean, he doesn't fit a lot of what you look for at linebacker. He's 5'10" and a half, 230 pounds. But he ran well. His testing numbers were solid. He ran in the 4.5s, but his production is just off the charts. I think it just, when you think of what he does well, where does he fit on your defense? He wasn't an overwhelming special teams player, so you're worried about that. Can he take on blocks and be a guy that consistently works through the trash? I mean, there are questions about that. A lot of his highlights came when he was, blitzing, and he sees things so quickly that he's in the backfield before the offense could do anything about it. That's why he had over 20 tackles for loss. So the urgency and play speed and instinctive nature that he plays with, I don't care what level of football you're playing. It's going to translate. And he just has the way I compared him was to like a UFC fighter. Like, he's so scrappy, so strong, so competitive.
It's getting you to the mat.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's frenetic. Sometimes it'll work against him a little bit. But man, I just don't know how he's not going to. Because he's usually not my type of guy, because he is a little undersized and he's taking.
You like your traditional mics,
I do, but I couldn't help but I gave him a 4th round grade, which is much higher than I thought I would give him going into the process. I just liked him more and more. This is one of those players when I gave him a grade, I knew I would be wrong on draft day, but I feel like I'd be right 2 years from now. And hopefully with the Vikings he gets a chance, because he's one of those guys that they will have a real tough time cutting a guy like Ivan Pace.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they love him, and they're playing him a lot in the preseason. I think they gave him the green dot, which means he's calling plays on the defense. So it does, and he had a couple of coverage botches that I noticed, but it's nothing like overly concerning. But it's stand out. Don't really see the starting undrafted rookie. And especially at the position like linebacker, that's a lot that they're giving to him. Just mentioning that he's a blitzer makes sense with what Brian Flores likes to do as well. So it could be an interesting name to keep an eye on. So
he's in front of Asamoah, right?
They're kind of going back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, and that's a 2nd-year player. That's who the Vikings drafted, thinking, okay, Kendricks might be a cap cut. Asamoah is going to be a guy that eventually take over that role, and let the best man win. That's something you want, competition at these positions, and looks like the Vikings have it.
Kind of respect teams that actually are fine with that. They're like, hey, whatever. Yeah. I gotta love that, because I know some teams that really protect the picks. But we're gonna move on down south here to the maiden. I don't know what I call it. I always want to say the South is like the maiden division. I don't know why, because it's like the new division. It's not in my brain. It's East, Central, West. That's what I grew up with. But the NFC South, second year players with the most to prove in the NFC South for you, Dane.
This was an easy one. I got to go with Ike Ekwonu. He was up and down as a starting left tackle for the Panthers last year. He really struggled against Myles Garrett in that opener. It was kind of like welcome to the NFL moment. And then he seemed to figure things out mid-season, and then I thought he disappointed a little bit down the stretch. So way too many penalties. I think it was 2nd most behind only Tyler Smith. And I loved him coming out of NC State. He was my top tackle that year. But there was some projection involved. You love the traits, but it's okay. He needs to be a little more, he needs to develop in some of these areas. And okay, now fast forward to this year, you've got an undersized rookie quarterback. The Panthers need him to develop quicker than what he's shown so far. This preseason, he has struggled. The communication seems off. His landmarks in pass pro have been inconsistent. The coaches love him. I know that for a fact, because of how hard he works, how much he wants to be better. It's just, and the talent is there. It's just, can he get it figured out before the quarterback gets hurt? That's kind of the big question with Ike Ekwonu going into this year.
Yeah, he was my answer, but I kind of had him just kind of in there, like just kind of some thoughts. And he kind of sums up a lot of my feelings with the Panthers. Is very disappointing early last year, and then like really came along. I actually really enjoyed watching the Panthers in the second half of last year, which is like shocking defense and offense. The offensive line was playing great, and he epitomized that. I already mentioned the game against Houston, the player Houston, not the team Houston, but also just in the run game, he's still already there. He's already a plus player in the run game, which is like really good. Okay, at least we have that. Thank God. But the pass game stuff is just like he's never trusts his sets. Like you can tell he's thinking in his sets. Like, okay, because that was an issue coming out of college, was he's overset overset. It was like, okay, you're a great athlete. You don't have to do that. just slow it down a little bit. And it seems now that he's like out of rhythm. He's like a golfer with a golf swing that they just learned something new. And they're trying to think of it. So the swing's not really smooth and everything. I speak from experience. So but the preseason has been like a little disappointing. Not some of the past stuff is not as bad. It's always never as bad as it seems and never as good as it seems. Watching it on film and watching all 22, it's like, okay, he did have some bad ones, but it's like overall is okay. But the run game, he's still strong. But yeah, he's got to justify being the OT tackle one and a building block for that team that needs them, especially on offense. Yeah. And the guy I'm going with was a different offensive lineman, is Trevor Penning, offensive tackle for the Saints. Got to see it. They used him as a 6th offensive lineman last year. He was battling injuries, kind of came in and out, kind of playing with the line. This year, still kind of looks like that raw prospect coming out of Northern Iowa. Kind of just, just doesn't have the lower body strength at times, consistent lower body strength to really get the push and kind of get blown back in pass sets. You see flashes of his movement and his athleticism that he tested well, but it just hasn't really come together yet. So again, they drafted him very high. They need him. They've had pretty big aspirations this year. So Trevor Penning, the left tackle for the New Orleans Saints, would be my answer for this question.
Well, I think I'm a little more optimistic on Penning because I used him for the next category, which is who's second-year player ready to break out.
Big step.
Because he missed most of his rookie year because of that injury, and I think it really affected him. But I thought just watching him this preseason, I thought he looked pretty good. I think you're exactly right. He was known as this big athlete, over aggressive mentality, and that's still the case. But I think he has shown maybe a little more control with NFL coaching,
especially.
Yeah, there's going to be rough spots this year, and he needs to continue to mature. There's no doubt about that. But I do think this year there will be more good than bad. The best way to put it, I don't think left tackle will be viewed as a weak spot for the Saints after this season.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, no, and that's the thing is that's what he was drafted to be. It was not going to be hey, day one he's going. It's like no, he's going to take some time. So it's just someone to keep an eye on.
I did have one more player for the second year with most to prove, and this is I think you can put Desmond Ridder in this category because he's a third rounder, right? So you don't necessarily think of he's got a lot to prove, but factor in, they've drafted an offensive skill player, the top 10 each of the last 3 years with Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. The offensive line is in good shape. Ritter's playing for an offensive coach who is going to put him in position to make plays. They are in a very winnable division. So again, even though Ridder was a 3rd round pick, he's got a lot to prove. Not only for Atlanta to win this year, but just to keep the franchise from upgrading the position in the offseason. So with all the context going around there, I do think that Ridder fits that category.
Yeah, and and how confident they were in kind of anointing him this year was very, even for me, who is like, I like Ridder. I was very surprised by that. I was like, oh, wow, that was very quick to do that. They had 4 starts and he was kind of, up and down those 4 starts. But again, I like Ridder. I do think I've never thought he would be like an elite guy or anything, but I thought he'd be a tolerable starter. Like I said, 18th this year, 18th best starter this year would be a success, especially for a 3rd rounder. But it's like, even if you compare him to like Sam Howell for the Commanders, he had to go through a battle with Jacoby Brissett. Like they didn't just give it to him. So that's what's just unique maybe going on with Ridder right now. But no, technically this is a great answer. So for the second-year players ready to take a big step, did you have any other players other than Penning or anyone that you want to throw out there?
I think in terms of breakout candidates, the Falcons with Arnold Ebiketie and Troy Anderson in their front 7.
Yeah.
I know listening to the division previews, you guys mentioned Anderson as a player that you guys both like as a breakout candidate, and I 100% agree. Big time athlete. His Montana State tape was a ton of fun. Obviously, he was raw as a rookie when you consider his background, but just interested to see what he can do in year 2. And then another guy who I know you like quite a bit, Rachaad White. Questions with Tampa at quarterback, questions with the offensive line. I'm not sold that White is going to be a 1,000-yard rusher this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ranks top 5 in the NFL among running backs in targets, maybe even higher. If Austin Eckler and Christian McCaffrey are the only backs this year with more targets than White, that wouldn't surprise me. I think that his skill set and just the way that offense is set up to the way that they're going to have to operate this year.
Yeah.
I think it wouldn't be surprising if he sees 80, 90 targets as a pass catcher.
Yeah, and that's his background too. The former
Right.
receiver and everything, and yeah, with their new offensive coordinator, they're running a lot more zone than they did in the past, and you can see Dave Canales trying to kind of use some Arians left witch runs, duo, which is more of an at you power run. The thing is, Rachaad White actually doesn't have the greatest feel on duo, so I'm actually kind of okay, what's the zone actually might be good for him. So I'm very curious to see how he does in the run game and stuff, because it's not like he tries to do the right thing, but you can tell it's not always natural as far as vision and stuff. He looks like a former receiver sometimes, but then sometimes he guesses right. And it's great because he's explosive and he's got good balance and everything. So yeah, I'm glad you brought him up. I actually have Luke Gadecki, the Bucks second rounder from last year, looking good in this preseason at the right tackle spot. They bumped Tristan Wirfs over to the left side. He looks fantastic on the left side. Zero concerns about how he's going to translate over there. Oh my God, he looks great. But the Gadecki on the right side, a lot better than I was anticipating in this preseason, at least. And just someone to keep an eye on. Coming out of the Central Michigan, shockingly had 2 offensive linemen drafted on day 2 last year. Don't really expect the Chippewas to have that type of guys. Well,
both were former tight ends. Yeah, they're athletic dudes.
Fisher. Gadecki is another one because he is. You could see him taking a little step forward, at least in the preseason. The one kind of just laying here and is Drake London. I just have to give him a shout out in one of these categories, so I'm going to throw him in here. My receiver 1 that I mentioned before in that last year's draft class actually had a better year than I think people realize. That Falcons offense is always going to be kind of weird as far as the counting stats, but you look at more of some of the underlying metrics, like successful targets per route run, which is a number I've really liked to look at. He was 9th among all players last year. He was in between Justin Jefferson and Ja'Marr Chase. That's pretty fun. 15th in yards per route run overall, all players. The guys just below him, so the guys he outranked were Amari Cooper, Scary Terry, Ja'Marr Chase, DeAndre Hopkins, and Devontae Smith. And Ridder knows where his bread is buttered. He peppered him. Just was every pass play, every drop back, he was going to Drake London. So I think he's going to have a little bit more counting stats this year. I'm very excited to watch him play just overall. And I think he's obviously going to take a big step forward this year.
Well, and I don't think people realize he had the same number of catches as Chris Olave, same number of touchdown catches as Chris Olave. It's not like he was drastically behind those 2 Ohio State guys, but he was right there in terms of targets, in terms of receptions. If he didn't break out in year 1, I think he definitely will.
That's why I felt like this was cheating. It was more like a national standpoint, breakout. That's kind of how I have to game this system, because sometimes I bring up some blocking receiver, blocking tight end. It's some guy breaking out. It's they're going to finish with 10 catches this year. So the last second-year player category for the NFC South, who had a better first year than most people realized?
I'm going to go with Saints corner Alontae Taylor, who was inconsistent, but the flashes I think are really, really promising. It was maybe the Falcons game last year where he kept getting his hands on the football. And with the Saints releasing Bradley Roby today, it looks like Taylor is going to be the new nickel for New Orleans, which I think fits his skill set really, really well. Scouting Taylor at Tennessee, I thought he might actually be a better safety because of just that versatility he offers with his athleticism, his size, his toughness. Definitely encouraged by what I saw from Taylor in year 1. And one other name I wrote down, I want to shout out Buccaneers tight end Ko Kieft, who drafted late, 6th round. He had 7 catches, baby. 7 catches. But as a blocker,
Dude, he
was really good.
He's good.
Yeah. And then the other thing, he was one of only 2 rookies last year with double-digit tackles on special teams. So Cade Otton, he was the better rookie tight end for the Bucs last year. But this guy deserves some love too with how he played as a blocker, then on special teams.
I'm glad you mentioned him. Whenever you see a tight end with 41, you're always like, I know what you are.
Right.
He'll never finish those career receptions. He'll never get to 40. Great. Both of those, they had to use him a little too much for maybe what that Bucs team was trying to be last year and Tom Brady's last year. But hey, live trial by fire for both of them. I liked them both. So great shout out right there. I actually went with Rashid Shaheed, the receiver for the Saints, undrafted free agent. I, even watching him, thought maybe he also wears number 22, which I hate, but whatever. But I actually, when even watching him, I thought he would just be a straight burner. and just one of those types. It's like, okay, get him in there. You're 20 snaps, 12 of them are go balls and posts. More real receiver to him than maybe I even gave him credit for watching the Saints last year. And when I kind of restudied that offense this offseason. So had a better year. Counting stats aren't like crazy or anything, but might get an uptick this year. And I think he complements who else they have. Chris Olave, the ghost of Michael Thomas, and other pass catchers that they have. So a nice complimentary piece who had a pretty good rookie year, especially for an undrafted free agent.
That's a good one.
And it's kind of a weird list for that category for me. I was kind of like, I don't know I was like, maybe Drake London, like maybe Chris Olave, I guess. But all right. So for rookies now, first round rookie that you're most excited to watch in the NFC South.
We got to have co-winners here, right?
Yeah.
The Falcons, they made Bijan Robinson a top 10 pick. He's equally elusive as he is a bruiser. The ball sticks to his hands as a receiver. And we know Arthur Smith, not afraid to do things a little differently. So what's it all going to look like? Can't wait to see that. And then, of course, Bryce Young, complete outlier size-wise for a number 1 overall pick. His arm is more average than it is elite. But he's genius level when it comes to reading coverages, just the natural instincts that he plays with. Now, again, we talked about this with Icky, but there are questions on the offensive line. The receivers aren't all that exciting. Honestly, in some ways, it's kind of similar to the situation he had at Alabama last year, relatively speaking, where it was primarily on the quarterback to create and make things happen. That's a lot to ask of a rookie. So, while the Panthers, they were an easy team to avoid last season. Like if you didn't have to watch them, like you didn't feel bad missing them. They are a must-watch team this year. No question about it with Bryce Young and how that's all going to gel with that coaching staff. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, those are 2 guys I had as well. Bijan Robinson, like you said, I know we're all going nuts about the receiving ability of him, but him as a runner is just, it's so much fun. I'm telling you, I can't watch any Texas guys. I need new tape of Texas in 2023. So I stopped focusing on Bijan because it's just like he distracts me no matter what. So Bijan, obviously, I'm excited for the Falcons offense, as pretty much everyone and their grandmother knows. But also Bryce Young, have to. He's just, even in preseason, man, he's just so smooth, so calm. Like you said, he has that genius level kind of like feel for the game, or just like intellect with the game. And he plays like that. Like, he has that innate feel for what's going on around him as far as pressure wise, getting the ball out. He had a touchdown to Adam Thielen that was absolutely beautiful. He threw it 2 steps before Thielen made his break. And you mentioned that he doesn't have overwhelming arm strength. He knows that. So he's not like going like, you see some guys with popcorn arms to get to the NFL, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait, that's picked. I used to get away with that when I was playing Ohio. But now, like Bryce Young, he's like, he knows. So he throws it nice and early with great ball placement. So really excited to watch him and see how they use him this year, because he's just a very, very fun player, even if obviously the size concerns. That's the thing about him real quick, is that as a player, it was never negative on him as a player. It was just the outlier as a size. So just got to keep that in mind when you watch him. So non-first round rookies that could make the biggest impact are ones that you're keeping an eye on this year in the NFC South.
Well, speaking of Bryce Young and the questionable receiver talent around him, Panthers, they targeted Jonathan Mingo in the 2nd round, and they expect big things out of him in year 1. I liked Mingo as a prospect. He's 6'2", 4.4 speed. I like his pacing as a route runner. He's competitive at the catch point. There's definitely upside here, and especially more so than what his role was at Ole Miss when you watch his tape. But he needs fine tuning. I liked guys like Cedric Tillman more, or Jaden Reed. I liked them as better options, but both were drafted after Mingo. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that all works out. Mingo's going to get a lot of opportunities. He's going to see a lot of targets. And so just interested to see how that works out. And then there were a couple offensive linemen in this division who are going to be thrown into the fire from day one. Matthew Bergeron in Atlanta, Cody Mock, Tampa. 2 college tackles trying to transition inside to guard. They also offer that position flex that you want. A lot's going to be expected of both those guys. So interested to see the impact they can make in year 1.
Yeah, I was wondering if I could mention Matthew Bergeron again. So I'm glad you checked that box for me. So I appreciate it. Zach Harrison as well, the edge for defensive end for the Falcons as well. Just a nice feisty player as they're trying to be kind of Saints East defense like that.
Right.
That he fits that perfectly. He feels like a Saints player, but he's with the Falcons and makes a ton of sense. Mingo was the one I had as well. Everything you mentioned, really already translating as a blocker, which he showed in college as well. But they're using him. They're trying to use him and spotlight him. He'll have some ups and downs, but I liked him. I really can't not much to add to what you nailed it. My feelings on Mingo as well. I'm going to give a shout out to a couple 6th-round receivers here. A.T. Perry with the Saints, who had a nice preseason. I just looking at their depth chart, he's going to be their 4 or 5. We'll see on cut day. Obviously, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but also Trey Palmer, who I know you like.
I almost put him down. Yeah, that's a good one.
He has looked great this preseason. And I know you're a big fan of him coming out. But he is another guy.
Speed. Yeah.
Yes. And has had some great catch point moments where he dunked a guy like Sean Kemp on one play, which was pretty awesome over the middle of the field. Kyle Trask kind of left him out hanging, and he made it look good. So, but those two guys, just interesting 6th-round receivers, which it's always fun to watch, especially this division, which teams in flux, they might get some playing time.
Yeah. All right. And you always wonder, okay, with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, who's going to be that third receiver who takes advantage of maybe some lesser attention on him? Trey Palmer absolutely could end up being him this year.
I know. Rashad White and Trey Palmer. It's some interesting Bucks pass catchers. Yeah.
Throw O'Keefe in there. And, there we go.
Love it. Get some targets together. Let's go, Baker. You got weapons. All right. So now we're going on to the NFC West into my time zone. So we're going with second-year players with most to prove in your mind. This was the NFC West was interesting for these categories. So I'm curious where you're going to go with these answers.
Well, I mean, for this category, it's obvious, right? It's got to be Brock Purdy. I mean, it's got to be. Now, I do think we could probably include just the entire Seahawks 2022 draft class because they performed so well as rookies that now there are expectations set. Avoiding that sophomore slump, living up to the hype, fair or not, and that's going to be important if Seattle's going to make the playoffs again. So Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas on the offensive line, Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen in the secondary. But, I mean, Brock Purdy, obviously trading Trey Lance. They love Sam Darnold, and what he's shown is could Sam Darnold realistically see snaps this year if, Brock Purdy doesn't live up to expectations? He only has 8 starts in the NFL, including the postseason. Now, he was really good, I mean, in those 8 starts. 16-4 touchdown interception ratio. I mean, I'm interested what you think with Brock Purdy going into year 2 with him. Is it as simple as the 49ers are, a lock to win the West and Brock Purdy is just going to be solid, or is there more concern there? I mean, just kind of let you go with Purdy. I mean, it's interested to hear it.
I know. I was like trying to find a second answer. I was like Trey McBride. I don't know, but I ended up going with Brock Purdy as well. And I'm not super high on Purdy. I think he got drafted exactly where he should have been drafted based off what I saw in college. I think with him is that he does get the easy plays done, if that makes sense. He always goes to the right read, which in that offense that's what Kyle Shanahan wants. I think he didn't get really punished for some of his chaos balls last year. And that was his MO coming out of college, was that he was chaotic. He was smart and everything, but then he would just all of a sudden black out, and it could be good or bad. And I think he hasn't been really punished for that yet. So I'm very curious to see what happens is if he maybe has a game like he had a couple games where it was like 3 drop picks. I think at Seattle was one of them. But now imagine if those get caught and he's 8 of 24 and they're in a tight game that they should be blowing out a team and he's just not getting it done. Not saying that'll happen. I think he can get the job done, but I'm very tempered with my expectations with him. I think he can get the job done, but I was slower roll and saying like, oh yeah, this guy should have been rookie of the year and everything. And obviously I like Darnold and I think they do too. I think they know they have that in their back pocket because I mean Darnold's made some throws this preseason. I know I'm a fan. I think you like him as well coming out, but it's like he has a different type of
can't give him up.
You can't do it, dude. He made 3 throws in the last game. I'm like, come on, man. At least look like shit, so I can just obviously get
right. Let me move on with my life.
I know if I'm gonna keep watching them, but yeah. So I'm curious. I haven't been really. I don't want to like bash the guy, but I'm not totally buying into the Purdy experience. The one thing I will say that he brings to the table, different than like a Jimmy G, he'll scramble, and he's actually a pretty good scrambler, and he's willing to push the ball. So that's something he does bring, but. we'll see how he does in 17-week season. He's coming off a UCL too.
It's going to be fascinating. Coming off the injury, it's going to be.
They're the second favorite in the NFC right now.
It's nuts. It is. It's gonna be so much fun to watch. No, that'll be fun. Yeah.
The NFC is gonna be so much fun. AFC is gonna be fun in a bloodbath way. NFC is gonna be a fun in a wild card way, not just wild card teams.
Right.
What happens? It's such a grab bag. So all right, sticking with the second year players that you think are ready to take a big step.
So 2 pass rushers stick out for me in this category. Seattle. I think we're going to hear more Boye Mafe noise in year 2. He was a guy that really toolsy coming out of Minnesota, but just wasn't yet the sum of his parts, still raw. But this preseason, I think he's looked good, a lot more coordinated with his attack. His hips, his hands, his feet, they're all on the same page. And when you do that, the results will follow. So I think that Mafe, we're going to hear more about him this year. And then in San Francisco, the stage is set for Drake Jackson to have a breakout season. Right? A lot of attention on Nick Bosa, even Javon Hargrave, Armstead's still there. Jackson's going to have his opportunities. He's a twitched up 270 pounder, and I'm interested to see just the hands, the power moves. How have they developed in year 2? Because again, the opportunities will be there for him.
Yeah, he's with the best D-line coach in the league who gets the most out of his players. So it's like kind of a no excuses situation as well. Right. Not that, last year he was second in the entire NFL with players 200 more pass rush snaps and splash plays, only behind DeMarcus Lawrence. But it was him. I listed this on our NFC West preview pod, but because he was my breakout candidate for the 49ers. But that list is DeMarcus Lawrence 1, Drake Jackson 2. Then it's Myles Garrett, Josh Uche, Brandon Graham, TJ Watt, Nick Bosa, Cam Hayward, Matt Judon, Max Crosby. So dudes, not like, oh, that's okay. These are kind of role playing guys. It's like, no, actual guys. So he's already shown it a little bit. They're also like, and I think you could speak to this too, was at USC, they kind of bumped his role and his weight around a lot. It wasn't that like a whole thing.
It fluctuated like 40 pounds. He was a 290 pounder. Then he lost weight when they brought in a new defensive coordinator. And then it's just, they did not do him any it's something that really held him back in terms of production, in terms of development. So I think he is a player that could end up looking like a steal because they got him end of the second, in the 60s. So could definitely end up being a steal if he's turns out to be the player we think he can be.
Yeah, I liked him coming out, and everything you mentioned. I think the consistency is going to help him so much. So stick with secondary players. Who are some that had a better first year than most people realize in the NFC West?
So I think Kobe Durant with the Rams qualifies. He had some nice moments. That Broncos game really stands out. Sounds like he's in the mix to be a starter this year. Cameron Thomas was better on the defensive line for the Cardinals coming off the bench than I think most people realize. My answer is going to be Spencer Burford, the 49ers, 4th round pick out of UTSA, won the starting right guard job in camp, started all 19 games, whatever it was, all the way through the playoffs. And there were some rough spots, like with any rookie. The NFC Championship game against that Eagles pass rush was particularly tough. But for a guy to come in as a rookie, join a veteran offensive line next to guys like Trent Williams and McGlinchey, Burford did a nice job. And he's not a name that I think most NFL fans think of when you think about this rookie class. And he's going to be an important part of the 49ers getting over the hump this season.
I agree. He was the first name that came to mind for me. I was shouting out Aaron Banks last year. I thought Aaron Banks had a good preseason. So I was like, okay, that's gonna be the guy that's gonna step up for this offensive line. And I was like, who's the right guard? I started watching him throughout the season. Yeah, he was a good, solid player as a 4th round rookie at that right guard spot. And the kind of line I've had with that 49ers offensive line was, especially last year and the end of last year, that was the most talented 49ers. It's not like rare, elite, 1990s Cowboys level, but the most talented offensive line, at least in the 49ers tenure, that Kyle Shanahan has had. And Burford's a part of that. Yeah. And it's not an overwhelming, it wasn't an overwhelming unit, but still is just better than some of the spare parts they've worked with before. So yeah, Burford, good player. I'm glad he gave him a shout out. The Seahawks offensive tackles, both of them, Charles Cross and Abe Lucas, I think are already plus players, already as rookies. At the tail end of the season, they got beat up a little bit. The rest of the line was falling apart. So had some dips to kind of hit the rookie wall, but I think they're going to be building block for a long time. Really, really high on them. And yeah, I had Kobe Durant as well. Everything you mentioned on that. So, and then moving on to first round rookies that you're most excited to watch in the NFC West.
I'm interested to see Paris Johnson. Obviously a player that the Cardinals traded up for, asking him to play right tackle, which he didn't play at Ohio State. So just seeing his development throughout the season will be somewhat of a reason to watch Arizona this year. But my answer has got to be the 2 Seattle first rounders, right? I mean, Devin Witherspoon in the secondary, and even more so Jackson Smith and Jigba in the slot. I think I'm probably most excited to watch him just because we've barely seen him since he had that all-time Rose Bowl performance, which feels like forever ago. So he's dealing with a wrist injury right now. So we'll see when exactly he gets back on the field. But when he does, it should be fireworks. And so I just can't wait to see it play out.
Yeah, he's like a lucha cruiserweight wrestler that you see like this one like huge high spot and it's pay-per-view, and then they get hurt all the time. And so you barely. Right. I know he made some business decisions maybe with the injury last year. but honestly, like that's what it is. It's that he had the high spots at that Rose Bowl, and it's like I'm still waiting. I'm like waiting for his next match. It's like I want to see Eddie Guerrero again. I want to see these guys. I want to see Ray Phoenix again. So yeah, JSN was the easy answer for me. And then Paris Johnson as well. And Witherspoon. I just want to see all of them. Like very interested in all these players. I liked all these players, and their landing spots are very interesting. I want to see if Paris Johnson can be that kind of building block that Cardinals team really needs as they kind of sell everything else around him, especially at the quarterback spot. All right. So last category here on the NFC West and on this show, non-first round rookie that can make the biggest impact in the NFC West.
I think the obvious answer is Zach Charbonnet, probably in Seattle, right? Even with Kenneth Walker, we're going to see plenty of Charbonnet this season. He's not that ultra explosive guy like Walker is, but he's above average in a lot of running back specific areas like vision, patience, contact balance, receiving skills. Maybe the best way to sum it up in baseball terms, Walker is your home run hitter. Charbonnet is more of that solid contact guy, piling up the singles and the doubles. So let's keep with the Seattle theme. Walker's, your Griffey, and Charbonnet's 1995 Edgar Martinez, right? Just the hell of a batting average
right now, Dane.
right down your alley, right? So that's right. The Indians beating the Mariners in the ALCS that year will still be one of my fondest memories. Sorry, but
I remember the fireworks going off on TV, and I remember I was like 6 years old. Just brutally getting my heart ripped out.
Yeah, that's all right. I mean, the Braves took care of business, and I soon felt the same way. But yeah, no, it's Charbonnet is they drafted him in the second round for a reason, even though Kenneth Walker showed so much promise as a rookie. Right. So how they use those two guys should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And Zach Charbonnet was my answer as well. And I said this on our NFC West pod, was that he was keeping the baseball comparisons. He was my Nick Swisher as far as the Moneyball analogy. Statistically, he was great. He was the number one back in FBS and success rate on first and second down, which is what the Seahawks offense needs more than anything else to stay ahead of schedule. And then on top of it, I like eye test wise. I had a third round grade on him going into the 2022 draft. He came back for the last year, and he ended up, him and Gibbs, I kind of had tiered similarly in different ways, though. Like just kind of the weight with Gibbs is what kind of knocked him down for me, but I still appreciate him. But Charbonnet, like you said, he just gets on base. He just does it all. He's good hands. You're not going to run choice routes to him, but like you check the ball down, he's going to get those 6 yards. Like he's just kind of that type of guy where he just
that's hilarious that our comparisons for Zach Charbonnet or Nick Swisher and Edgar Martinez, like that's
what he is.
That works. Yeah, I love it.
So 20 home runs, nice on base percentage. He gets on base. Yeah, that's what he does. He might have to be a DH. He's not going to be playing the field though. Exactly. But no, Zach Charbonnet. If I also could pick a Ram, I guess, because they need it. That's kind of was my secondary choice for this answer. And then Catrell Clark, the corner
from Louisville,
starting for the Cardinals right now. I think everyone that watched him liked him. I know you kind of
athletic, feisty,
just a football player. That's what he was. And I know Derek Klassen liked him. Yeah, just a guy that always stood out when you watched him go against Louisville. So Catrell Clark would be the last one I'm going to throw in there for this.
Well, there's definitely some maybe because the Rams, the Cardinals, they're just, the state of their roster is as it is. So there's a lot of day 3 guys even that could emerge. Like you think of the Cardinals, we're going to see plenty of Clayton Tune this year at quarterback. It's him and Josh Dobbs, and Arizona, make no mistake about it, they want Caleb Williams. And so for that reason alone, we're going to see Clayton Tune this year. And then, for the Rams, 2 dark horse impact rookies, Puka Nacua, who, based on film, I gave him a 3rd round grade. Smart, athletic, another tough guy, but he kept getting hurt. And I dropped his grade, I think, just to like the 6th round because of that. And it's a big if he can stay on the field, I think he has all the talent to produce and produce early. And then on defense, Travius Hodges-Tomlinson, LaDainian's nephew, all 5'7.5" of him. If he were 3 inches taller, he would have been a day 2 lock probably. Love the speed, love the mentality.
Stand out in preseason so far. Like he just shows up.
One of the reasons he fell, which I guess is tied to his lack of size, but it's the penalties. He was a flag magnet at TCU. His last year was like 14, 15 penalties. And even this preseason, he's had a few penalties, including that egregious face mask against Denver that got him ejected from the preseason game.
Bad.
So, yeah, he has the athletic traits and the mentality for the NFL, but he has to prove he can overcome that lack of size without sacrificing the discipline part of it. So, look, we know the Rams defense is going to be below average this year, so he should get his opportunities.
Nope. Great shout out. I'm glad you shout out. Even Byron Young for the Rams, the 3rd round player, has had a decent preseason. He got banged up. Interesting background. Look more into him and stuff. But he had his first preseason game. He really showed up. You could just tell he has no plan. He's a wild horse.
He's explosive.
Explosive.
Right.
Yeah, total wild horse. Just like you have no idea what you're getting on every snap. But you can see the flashes, and like that's like a 3rd round flyer you take on an edge. Like you can't get those. Those are kind of 1st roundish tools. But it's like, all right, maybe we get something out of him. Maybe he can be just a role player for us with that. But Puka Nacua is a great one as well. I know Derek Klassen liked him a lot as well. So that was kind of everybody that I talked to liked him, that I trust, I should say, liked him. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I do too. So maybe, all right, we'll just keep an eye on him. Made sure to snap him up in some dynasty leagues.
Hopefully, just stay healthy. Yeah, just stay on the field.
That's it.
I hope that's
gets sweeps, though. He's a good block. Like he actually fits the Rams perfectly. I'm actually so glad he ended up there.
Right, and he's in an offense, with Cooper Kupp and Van Jefferson. I mean, he's going to learn from these guys, and it's a good situation for him.
Yeah. All right, well, that's it. We got a nice feature film length review. I got to stop with these. It was a lot of names, but this is great. This is so much fun talking to you. I love getting background, and I'm sure people do too, of just players that even I are obscure to me, and so that's what you're so great at, Dan. So thank you again for providing that insight. I love listing names off with you. Just throw some dudes out there that were standing out to us. So this was a lot of fun. We'll be back again next time. We'll be reacting to week 1 of the college football season.
Heck yeah.
Thank God we are here. We are here. Football is starting officially. None of the week 0 stuff. So Here we go. All systems go. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We will see you next week.